Spiritualist ministry. I welcome and introduce you to Diana Friedell, our director and pastor, who's going to be giving today's homily, Heavenly Ever After, but what about hell? Here's Diana.
Okay. So Father Murphy walks into a pub in Donegal and says to the first man he meets, "Do you want to go to heaven?" And the man said, "I do, Father." And the priest said, "Then stand over there against the wall." Then the priest asked the second man, "Do you want to go to heaven?" "Certainly, Father," was the man's reply. "Then stand over there against the wall," said the priest. Then Father Murphy walked up to O'Toole and said, "Do you want to go to heaven?" O'Toole said, "No, I don't, Father." And the priest said, "I don't believe this. You mean to tell me that when you die, you don't want to go to heaven?" And O'Toole said, "Oh, yes, when I die, yes. I thought you were getting a group together to go right now." So my husband and I were watching a new Netflix series called Heavenly Ever After. And when the main character dies, she chooses to take a subway to the afterlife. And all the other characters on the subway, also recently deceased, were deep into very worried and anxious prayer. And suddenly the subway comes to a halt, and the speaker overhead cheerfully announces, "First stop, Hell Station. First stop, Hell Station." And she's like, thinks, so they're going to take me, because she knows she had many reasons why she was going to hell. And she was trying to get up and exit, but something held her in her place. She couldn't get up. Then suddenly other people seated around her, one by one, started getting sucked up out the door. One of them shouting, "I'm sorry, I did not please my parents," on the way out, which I think was a sort of a joke. The series is made in Korea, and that's a big thing, is honoring your parents. And that reminded me that many people out there are living their lives out of fear of eternal damnation to hell. What a horrible way to live our lives. Was the concept of hell needed in the ancient past to keep people afraid and thereby force them to behave morally and ethically, for fear of punishment? Or is it outdated in today's modern spiritual path? Today, I wanted to explore concepts of hell as embodied by differing philosophies and religions. Because at ISD, we believe that everyone is on their own spiritual search for truth. Let's find our truth. The concept of hell is out there, right? It's still prevalent in the society we grew up in and in the teachings of several different religious traditions. When I was growing up in the Methodist tradition, there were pictures of hell in our Sunday school workbooks, and it was pretty clear that only very bad people were going to go to this desolate place. Our Sunday school teacher kept reminding us not to be afraid. Uh, Desolate place of suffering after you died. You were taught to stay within the lines if you wanted God to choose you to go to heaven. If school buddies on the bus misbehaved, you would hear others scolding, "Oh, God hears you." And my Catholic friends next door who attended confession every Friday would say, "Oh, you're going to hell," at the slightest infraction. I think we all did. And of course, we still use the power of our words to curse. It's still common to tell someone to go to hell, or we use that phrase to express astonishment or outrage at their bad behavior. What is hell exactly? I just want to get that definition from Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, in religion and folklore, hell is a location or state in the afterlife in which souls are subjected to punishment after death. Religions with a linear divine history sometimes depict hells as eternal destinations, such as Christianity and Islam, whereas religions with reincarnation usually depict a hell as an intermediary period between incarnations, as the case in Indian religions. Religions typically locate hell in another dimension or under Earth's surface. And we'll talk more about those intermediary periods later in this talk. In the ISD apologetics class, which we've been recently learning the history of the modern spiritual movement, and we studied the teachings of John Calvin, a Lutheran minister in the 1700s, who taught the concept of predestination, that God already decided who was going to be saved and who was not, and that almost everyone was going to hell. No matter how hard you tried to be good, it didn't matter because your destination was already predetermined by God, not a very nice God. In the early Protestant churches of New England, it was common to lose a newborn baby, or even the mother, and even innocent babies were not guaranteed to be saved. You had to rush in a minister to baptize your child, in order to assure that they were not going to hell. So not much motivation in Calvinist philosophy to improve yourself, is there? Talk about living in fear rather than joy. Have you ever been asked by someone, have you been saved? Loaded question. Have you been saved? Yeah. And what does it mean exactly to be saved? Now, for someone who asks you that question, probably they may be following a more biblical Christian path, and you have these guidelines directly from the Bible. Everyone is, and this is from a website I found. Okay, so I'm just quoting the way they wrote it. Everyone is born into sin, and we all fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23 and Romans 5:12. Therefore, everyone needs to be saved from sin and death, Romans 6:23. We cannot save ourselves. To be saved, we must place our faith in Jesus Christ, who died on the cross to pay the penalty for our sins, Mark 10:45. When we place our faith in him, we receive forgiveness for our sins, Acts 2:38. And we are made right with God, Romans 3:24. Side note, I put that quote in there, but you have to understand at ISD, the Bible is considered to be one of many sacred texts and is not to be taken literally. To us, Jesus was a master teacher, a prophet. Often we like to say our brother, the way shower, whose wisdom is still accessible and vital to our lives today, along with many other master teachers and guides who we may actually be able to be in touch with in our own private practice. So according to that definition I just read, we are all born lost souls, full of sin, which is that Calvinist view of predestination, remember? At ISD, some of our roots go back to the transcendentalists like Emerson, who believed instead that we are all born as a blank slate, John Locke philosophy, neither good nor bad. So who we become is entirely the result of how we were brought up and what we were taught. We are the sum of our environment, and we have free will to determine our own destiny. Edgar Cayce, the renowned psychic medium in the 1940s, who you remember was the sleeping prophet, asserted that sin is misuse, and this is a quote from a website, someone who was saying his words, sin is a misuse of the gift of free will bestowed by the Creator to enable the soul to be itself, yet choose to be one with the Creator. We choose evil, or we choose the good, the just, and the beautiful. When we choose to turn away from divine love, we bring evil into the world, end quote. Also, we have the thought from a lot of our metaphysical teachings and kind of New Age understandings that may feel right to you, that we put ourselves in hell or heaven after judging our own behavior, depending on how guilty we feel. Okay. By the way, there are just as many quotes in the Bible stating that all people are saved and God is patient and loving while people are transforming and making amends. And that is the foundations of universalism. You'll find elements of universalism. Everyone is saved by an all-loving God in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in Catholicism, in Islam, and in many, many others. Okay. In an article by Rabbi Baruch Halevi for Jewish Boston, he answers the question about our soul. He answers the question about what Judaism teaches about heaven and hell. In the article, he compares our soul to a sock that you put on your foot. Every act we do, now I'm quoting him, every act we do in our lifetime leaves an imprint on our soul. The good we do brightens and elevates our soul, and every wrongdoing leaves a stain that needs to be cleansed. If at the end of our life we leave this world without fixing the wrongs we have done, our soul is unable to reach its place of rest on high. We must go through a deep cycle of cleansing. Our soul is flung around at an intense spiritual heat to rid it of any residue it may have gathered. Picture the sock in the dryer and washer to prepare it for entry into heaven. And end quote. The deep cleansing he's talking about can take place in what is known as Gehenna, similar to what Catholics call purgatory, a waiting place, a layover stop on the way to heaven to work out those stains or sins so that you can arrive in heaven freshly cleansed. So in an attempt to find views that we may have in common with different faith traditions, because that's important to us, obviously, we want to find the commonality. We all come from the same place, no matter what we believe. From another website, BibleDictionaryToday.com, the term saved in the biblical sense primarily refers to the act of being rescued from sin and its consequences, primarily death and separation from God. So the consequences of sin is that you experience being separate from God. So if you're bad, God is going to shut the door on you and not let you into the heavenly realm. So you would feel isolated and lost, having lost your connection to God or the divine. And if heaven is actually an experience you can create here on earth, Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, said we are all co-creators of our earthly experience, then that feeling of separation is our divine punishment. At our house growing up, the worst punishment you could receive is to be banished to the isolation of the closet, the hall closet. And my brother Robert spent a lot of time there. And he's famous in our family, the stories of when he came out, he would have a huge sculpture because he had been bending hangers into sculptures, making lemons out of lemonade. Do we need to have the threat of punishment by eternal damnation to behave ethically and morally while we are still in physical form? Now, maybe for some people that really works for them, which is fine. That's the only way I can stay on, an even keel on a path is thinking, if I don't, I'm going to be eternally punished. And so maybe that's the motivation. But what if we could go through that cleansing process that Rabbi Halevi describes while we are still on the physical plane? In the principles we follow here at the Institute for Spiritual Development, we say that God is within us and that spiritual unfoldment is progressive and unending, and that the doorway to reformation is never closed against any soul. Who read that principle this morning? Was that you? Yeah, Connie? Or yeah, somebody read that one this morning. I was like, thank you. In other words, you can always better yourself. The doorway to reformation is never closed. I find sometimes one of the things we do for in mediumship when you're really advanced in this work is it's called the rescue of souls. Sometimes a soul has crossed over and believes that there's a hell, and they don't want to go there, and they hide out or find some way to hide out rather than crossing into the light. So that's something we commonly find when we're doing mediumship, or at least I do, and readings for people. So back to the script. If we're going to find a commonality between Christian beliefs and ISD, we might say that we agree that to be isolated from an experience of the divine can make us feel adrift, lost, and alone. Not that God rejected us or sent us to the closet, but we put ourselves there as a consequence of the choices we made. If we make bad choices in our behavior that causes someone else to suffer, we are choosing to operate at a low level vibration. At the low vibration of revenge, guilt, fear, and some of the other things, depression, sorrow, we sometimes lose touch with that connection. And we can't experience that total oneness with God or source energy, that transcendent feeling we get when we have a peak experience. We can regain that experience of oneness, transcendence through many spiritual practices while here on earth in the physical plane. And it doesn't matter what religion or denomination that you align with, but we get to experience a wide variety of uplifting practices here. And many are done in many religious disciplines, practices. Meditation, sound healing. Just yesterday, we had an amazing experience with sound healing. Yoga, drumming, singing, prayer, affirmations, reciting sacred mantras and prayers, divine rituals of all kind, energy healing, and many more. There is not just one way to an experience of the divine, not just one way. Okay, we'll get there step by step. I assert that we can become better people and do good in the world without the threat of hell and eternal damnation. Each on our own path and by our own free will, we have the power to make small changes that have a huge impact, both in ourselves and in the world. Spiritual progression is unending. I'll end with a quote from John Murray, the founder of American Universalism. He was also a Freemason, interestingly. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. And that is attributed to John Murray. Thank you.
Thank you.